In the gospel text of today, taken from chapter 5 of the Gospel of John, verses 17 to 30, we will encounter the reaction to Jesus healing a paralytic on the Sabbath. In John chapter 5, verses 1 to 9, a man who lay at the pool of Bethesda for 38 years is raised by Jesus, is made well by Jesus through 3 commands: rise, take up your pallet and walk. This man exactly obeys the instructions of Jesus, a man who could not move, who was an invalid for 38 years, now is made whole. He rises, he takes up his pallet and walks. However, because that day is a Sabbath day, and you are not meant to do any kind of work on a Sabbath, the religious leaders who noticed the man walking with his pallet in his hand begin to question him, not knowing that he was ill for 38 years. The man does not give him the background of himself, but only repeats the command which Jesus had given him. In other words, he points a finger at Jesus. He puts the blame on Jesus. He says, I am not at fault. The one who healed me said to me, rise, take up your pallet and walk. And that's why I am blindly obeying him. I do not have a mind of my own. I blindly obey what he says to me. This is why the religious leaders were upset with Jesus, because they realized that this man, according to them, was only following instructions, and so they accused Jesus. In his response to the accusation, Jesus talks about the Father, that is God, who is eternally present. And because God is eternally present, and because for God there is no past and there is no future, for God there is no Sabbath, or every day is the Sabbath day. And that is why the Father can work on all days. The Father can work at every time. And Jesus believes that the Father has given him the same mandate to do what the Father does, because Jesus is totally dependent on the Father and can do nothing without the Father's authority, without the Father's permission, without the Father's grace. So he admits that he is, in a way, following the Father's instructions, and because for the Father there is no past and no future and no Sabbath, or every day is a Sabbath, Jesus can heal on all days. Secondly, Jesus asks the religious leaders to go beyond simply a blind following of a rule or regulation. Rules and regulations are important for order. Rules and regulations are important for decorum. But rules and regulations can also become ends in themselves, and when they become ends in themselves, we become slaves to these rules. We let the rules rule us instead of ruling the rule. Jesus is inviting the religious leaders to look beyond the rule occasionally. And when do we look beyond the rule? We look beyond the rule when it is the case of human need, or the need even of the environment. Then we keep the rule aside for the time being and move on to helping the person, no matter what day in the year it might be, even if sometimes we have to go beyond the rule. Jesus was always able to discern when he needed to go beyond the rule, because his primary concern was the human being. Have you let rules rule you? Will you attempt to rule rules today by focusing on human need and not on the rule?